All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. We're looking at the absolute kingdom-shattering love triangle right at the center of the 1995 film First Night. This story takes one of the absolute most famous legends in human history and just completely strips it down to its rawest, most emotional core. And right out of the gate, it asks this really fascinating question. What actually happens when you strip away Merlin, the dragons, the magic, the whole shebang from the King Arthur legend? I mean, we're all so used to seeing Camelot totally bathed in mysticism, right? Enchanted swords, wizards, all of that. But the source material, it asks us to look at the legend through a totally different lens. So the answer is this remarkably grounded, purely human world. The stakes here, they are entirely driven by human nature. First Night zeroes in on this massive, ultimate conflict between duty and desire. Without that familiar safety net of magic or prophecy to fall back on, every single decision these characters make carries literally fatal weight. At its heart, it's really about a wandering rogue who finally finds a cause actually worth dying for. And you can see this conflict perfectly when you look at our two leading men. I mean, talk about a stark contrast. On one hand, we've got Lancelot. Forget that traditional image of the shiny, perfectly noble knight. This version of Lancelot is a totally reckless, wandering swordsman scraping by in village brawls for loose coin. He's actually deeply haunted by childhood trauma, specifically watching his own village burn to the ground, which leaves him with this terrifying death wish. It makes him a wildly unpredictable, deadly fighter. Now flip that around, and you have King Arthur. He's older, he's wise, incredibly noble, and deeply driven by this massive desire to unite a fractured Britain through peace. So you literally have chaos and trauma on one side and total order and wisdom on the other. Right smack in the middle of these completely contrasting men is Lady Guinevere. She's the beautiful ruler of the highly vulnerable kingdom of Lyonesse. Now she agrees to marry King Arthur, but it's absolutely crucial to understand why. She respects him, sure, but this marriage is completely driven by a profound sense of duty. Why? Because right now, her lands are being brutally terrorized by our antagonist, Prince Malagant. And Malagant isn't just some random warlord. He's actually a brutal, rogue, former Knight of the Round Table who wants the throne for himself. So Guinevere is literally sacrificing her own personal freedom just to secure Arthur's protection for her people. But, the universe always has a way of completely upending our plans, doesn't it? While Guinevere is traveling to Camelot, Malagant's men ambush her carriage deep in the woods. And guess who just happens to be wandering nearby? Lancelot. He swoops in, saves her life, and right there in the middle of all that chaos, this undeniable, absolutely electric chemistry sparks between the grounded queen and the reckless rogue. I mean, talk about an intense meet-cute. Lancelot playfully pushes her to just follow her heart, but Guinevere is heavily anchored by her responsibilities. She firmly refuses to break her vow of duty to Arthur. So, moving right into Act 2, let's see how this tension really builds. Lancelot just can't let it go. He follows Guinevere all the way to Camelot and decides to enter this insane, brutal public challenge called the Gauntlet. We're talking a deadly, purely mechanical obstacle course. And using nothing but his sheer agility and that crazy, fearless nerve of his, Lancelot actually survives. He wins the whole thing. The grand prize? A kiss from the future queen. But watch what happens next. Instead of swooping in for a romantic kiss in front of the whole kingdom and humiliating her, he just respectfully kisses her hand. That one single action publicly reveals a massive sliver of deep nobility hiding right under his rough exterior. Now, watching all of this unfold from the stands is King Arthur. And here's the thing. Arthur is completely unaware of the romantic tension simmering between Lancelot and his bride. He's just deeply impressed by Lancelot's utter lack of fear. So Arthur basically takes this young warrior under his wing, like a father figure, and he imparts this incredibly profound lesson. He tells him, true courage isn't not caring if you die, it's fighting for something you actually want to live for. It's a real game changer of a moment. Inspired by all that potential, Arthur offers him the ultimate honor, a seat at the round table. But here's the catch, the really agonizing psychological trap. When Lancelot accepts that invitation, he swears a sacred oath to a man he deeply admires, both as a king and a father figure, while at the exact same time being hopelessly in love with that king's wife. Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place. From there, the tension just turns into a total pressure cooker. Malagant forces a sudden, massive crisis by successfully kidnapping Guinevere and dragging her off to his dark, underground fortress. Does Lancelot wait around for Arthur's army to mobilize? Absolutely not. He goes totally rogue, infiltrating the fortress entirely alone. It's a wild sequence. He navigates these deadly traps, pulls off a thrilling solo rescue, and gets her back to Camelot. He's hailed as a hero. But Lancelot knows his feelings for the queen are just way too dangerous now. He realizes he has to leave Camelot to avoid completely betraying Arthur. So he sneaks into Guinevere's chambers for one final goodbye, and, totally overcome by emotion, they finally share this passionate, forbidden kiss.
And at that exact, devastating, and possibly tragic moment, King Arthur walks in. It is literally their absolute worst fear realized. The devastation on Arthur's face in the source narrative is just gut-wrenching. In a split second, he discovers the ultimate betrayal by his absolute favorite new knight and his beloved wife.
Now remember, Arthur is a man totally defined by order. He's a rigid believer in the law. He can't just sweep something like this under the rug, no matter how much it destroys his own heart. So he violently strips Lancelot of his knighthood on the spot, charges both of them with high treason, and schedules a very public trial right in the courtyard. But before any formal judgment can even happen, the outside world completely crashes in. The citizens of Camelot are totally divided over this trial, and it creates this immense, chaotic distraction. Mulligan, he brilliantly exploits this. He uses the chaos to launch a massive, full-scale surprise invasion. His army literally breaches the supposedly impenetrable gates of Camelot, and suddenly a brutal, bloody war spills right into the city's streets. The trial is instantly forgotten. At this point, survival is literally the only thing that matters. Despite having his heart completely shattered, Arthur really proves why he's the true king here. He fights fiercely in those chaotic streets to protect his people. But amidst all the madness, tragedy strikes. Arthur is hit by a crossbow bolt fired by the rogue prince himself, Malagant. The great king is fatally wounded, and he collapses. Seeing his king, his ultimate father figure, fall, it just pushes Lancelot right over the edge. He flies into an absolute rage. And in this incredibly highly symbolic moment, Lancelot actually picks up Arthur's fallen legendary sword, Excalibur. This tragedy finally forces Lancelot to choose a cause worth fighting for, proving Arthur's earlier lesson about true courage. Wielding Excalibur, Lancelot just tears his way through the chaos, confronting Malagant. In a desperate final duel, Lancelot disarms and defeats the rogue prince, single-handedly ending the invasion and saving Camelot.
So the battle is won, but man, the cost is just immeasurable. Lying on his deathbed in his final moments, Arthur's ultimate defining nobility really shines through. He looks at Guinevere, and he forgives her for just having a human heart. He looks at Lancelot, and he completely forgives him for the betrayal. And then, with his dying breath, Arthur names Lancelot the new champion of Camelot. He officially hands him Excalibur, entrusting him with the huge burden of protecting the entire kingdom. He passes his ultimate responsibility to the very man who betrayed him, because he recognizes the true hero Lancelot has finally become.
Because this specific version of the legend commits so heavily to a grounded human reality, it doesn't end with Arthur being spirited away on some magical boat to the mystical Isle of Avalon. No. Instead, we get this incredibly emotional, grounded Viking-style funeral. Arthur's body is placed on a boat, pushed out onto the dark water, and set ablaze with flaming arrows as Lancelot, Guinevere, and the surviving knights watch from the shore. It is such a somber, deeply human goodbye to a massive leader. So, as Lancelot is left just standing there on the shore, suddenly tasked with carrying the incredible legacy of the man he both fiercely loved and tragically betrayed, it leaves us with something pretty profound to think about. When you completely strip away the magic and the grand destiny, what are we actually supposed to take away from this grounded tale about the human heart? We've seen Arthur's strict adherence to duty and Lancelot's wild pursuit of desire, and they both led directly to this fiery conclusion. So I'll leave you with this to ponder. In the end, when the swords are finally lowered and the kingdom is saved, is duty or desire the true mark of a hero?